Hello, welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq for February 11th, 2014. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today I'm joined by John Markley and Stan Nurilov. I'm Jim Clausing. I wanted to jump right in here. We've talked in the last few weeks about these amplification attacks that were using NTP, and for a number of months we've talked about DNS amplification and SNMP amplification. And US CERT sent out an alert actually initially on the 17th of January, but they just updated it this past week. They mentioned a number of UDP protocols that are being used for these sorts of reflection amplification attacks. DNS, NTP, SNMP, NetBIOS, SSDP, CarGen, Quote of the Day, BitTorrent, just a number of the different protocols that the bad guys are using for these amplification attacks. The biggest bang for their buck appears to be with NTP, CarGen, and the Quote of the Day, where they get amplification factors of 140 on up. But just another thing to be aware of. Again, you should be blocking inbound UDP to any of your devices that could potentially be used for these reflection attacks unless you have a need to expose those. But other than DNS and to some extent NTP, most of these protocols probably aren't something you want to be exposing to the internet anyway. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that to everybody's attention. I'm sure the bad guys will find other vulnerabilities in various implementations of protocols that they'll be able to leverage for these amplification attacks. But the US CERT has this bulletin out that lists a number of them that have been seen lately. And as I said, the one that we've been talking about the last few weeks, fortunately, it's pretty much died off. Still see a little bit of it, but most people have gotten the word and have patched or disabled the monlist command. But NTP was the most recent favorite on the list. So.
Yeah, the other thing I think too is something that we always remind people is if you don't need to run SMTP or you don't need to run DNS or NTP, then turn those services off. Then you're really not susceptible.
Exactly. If you're not running if you don't have a reason to be running a DNS server or an NTP server, absolutely turn them off. And SNMP is something that should be restricted just to your management networks and that kind of thing. So
I think an important thing about the NTP part of the attack is that I think there is a set of devices out there by some manufacturer, and they use the same instructions for setting up an NTP server as for setting up the NTP client. And so I think sometimes network administrators can make a mistake and they can inadvertently turn on the server portion of the NTP protocol instead of just turning on the client portion. So that was one of the device manufacturers was referenced in a CVE. And I think that's kind of a problem. I don't know that a lot of people have spoken about before in terms of misconfiguration. So some people might think of, that they're not actually running a server. They might have thought that they turned it off, but because of the way the device presents the option to you, you might inadvertently turn it on. So it might be best to also combine your configuration with some sort of a scan against your own IP space, just to make sure that you're not exposed to some of these things, just to make sure you really are safe and that your firewall is blocking things that you're not expecting to be set up.
Absolutely. With the Linux, Unix version of NTPD, if you don't put the restrict command in the ntp.conf to limit who can talk to it, then you've then you pretty much set yourself up as a server and anybody can talk to you. So that's a good point. Thanks, Stan. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here quickly today is Microsoft Patch Tuesday, and there were a bunch of patches. I don't have the number in front of me right now, but there were something like 7 or 8 bulletins released today. The one that I really wanted to highlight is the MS14-010. It's the Internet Explorer patch. This one actually wasn't mentioned in the advance notification that Microsoft sent out last Thursday or Friday. They always send out, the late in the week before what they think is going to be coming. But they updated that yesterday, or maybe it was Sunday. They added a couple more, and one of them was this Internet Explorer patch. It is a critical on Microsoft's scale, and it's one that is pretty significant, especially if you're running IE11. This patch covers a whole bunch of CVEs. I don't remember exactly. It's like 15 CVEs or something, and one of them actually is being exploited in the wild right now. That one is CVE 2014-0267, which from the Microsoft Bulletin appears to only apply to IE11, but that one is being exploited in the wild, so this is one that should be applied sooner rather than later. As we say every month about this time, for the home users, make sure you've got automatic updates turned on, and this will get applied pretty quickly in the next 24 hours or so. But in an enterprise, where you want to test them before you push them out, this is one that should go out to all of the laptops and workstations as soon as possible, especially if you're running IE11. But there are a whole bunch of CVEs in here, some of them applying as far back as IE6. So make sure you get this one applied as soon as possible. Stan, what do you have for us today?
I guess it's an advanced persistent threat that was discovered by Kaspersky, and it was called, in English, the Mask. And one interesting thing about it, actually, is that when they just blogged about it, within a few hours, the whole infrastructure for that entire, advanced persistent threat was taken down right away. So it kind of shows a little bit that it might have been an advanced threat, and whoever the threat actors were paying attention to, the intelligence that people are putting out there, to the blogs that are being written by security researchers. An interesting thing about this virus, or this threat, is that it seems to possibly, there's evidence that it can impact Linux workstations as well as possibly iPhones, MacBooks, and they even had, I wouldn't say it was complete evidence, but they had a hint, I guess, that there might be even impacted Android devices. So the way the threat is intended to affect people, it seems to be cross-platform, and that signals. It should signal to others, and it's something we've been saying all along, is that other devices can be penetrated, but it should signal to consumers that they need security solutions on their mobile devices. They need security solutions on their items that are not PCs, such as MacBooks or Linux computers. Another interesting thing about this was that Kaspersky actually discovered the threat because it appeared to target them somewhat. So early versions of this threat that they were able to get their hands on actually had discovered a vulnerability in Kaspersky products that allowed them to go undetected on Kaspersky machines by taking advantage of this one vulnerability. So that kind of technique actually clued Kaspersky into learning more about this threat. Another interesting thing about it is that it appeared to Kaspersky, based on their analysis, that the authors of the malware spoke Spanish, and based on the incidence rate of infection, it seems to be impacting like southwestern Europe and portions of like North Africa. They have a great paper on this threat that details out the infrastructure that was in use. They detail out the domain names and IP addresses that were used, some of the URLs, and they give really great detail about how the threat worked, how all of the plugins came together. And I definitely encourage everybody to check it out. The link that we provide. It's one of I guess the level of detail certainly rivals the level of detail that was provided by Mandiant early on last year about another set of APT threat actors. And I definitely encourage people to check it out and just be aware of the current state of threats like this.
It was interesting that this one, among the sensitive data types that it tried to exfiltrate, was not just documents, but also was looking for encryption keys, VPN configurations, SSH keys, RDP configurations. Definitely going after the things that it could use to spread itself too.
That's a good point, Jim. Actually, that reminded me that they talked about file types that they weren't even familiar with that this threat was going after. So it seemed like it even targeted possible file formats that are not part of your standard software distribution. So maybe, very specific types of targets.
The interesting, I think, too, you pointed out, Stan, is that they were targeting that Kaspersky flaw, but they were also targeting other, software flaws like an Adobe Flash and some of the browsers. And, it's clear that, again, we can never preach this enough. Keep your, versions up to date as much as possible, because they're fixing these things, all the time, and you just don't know, that what could be susceptible, today is your old stuff that you just keep forgetting to update or just don't bother.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the flaw that the bad guys were using to stay hidden actually affected very old versions of Kaspersky, and new ones had since been patched, but the threat actors were still using them because I guess people, hadn't patched their AV solution to the newest possible version. So it is definitely, if you don't have a good patching practice in place or a good process in place, you would be, you could potentially be a victim for these tactics.
Thanks, Dan. John, there's some sort of an issue with Find My iPhone?
Yeah, it's kind of a scary thing and not so scary. Basically, researchers found that you can disable the Find My iPhone, and it works both in iPad versions as well as the iPhone versions, and I would assume, though I did not test it, also on other Apple iOS products. What it allows you to do is, through kind of a combination of settings and manipulation, is actually turn that off without having to know the iCloud permissions. So if you know how Find My iPhone works, it actually connects you to iCloud and does some connectivity verification through how the devices talk back and forth in iCloud. It requires you to change those settings to actually know the iCloud password. Kind of in a nutshell, you go into settings, you enter a fake password for iCloud, gives you an error. You get out of that, you go back into settings, the same setting for iCloud, and you remove the comment that's there that tells it it's actually an iCloud connection. And hit done, boom, it just, somehow that little green flag for Find My iPhone that enables it on the device, it clicks off. but if you heard how I described it, you actually had to go into settings, right? I said you had to go into settings, you had to go and do this, and you had to do that. Well, guess what? That means you physically have the device, and you've already have gone past, any kind of PIN or thumbprint reader or whatever you may have had to get into the device. So again, if you have an iPhone or an iPad or any of those devices, just make sure that you've set a PIN. And these type of vulnerabilities, are not as big a deal.
If I understand this right, if the bad guy, though, does manage to get their hands on the device and they can go into the settings, they can disable this. So if they do that before the owner realizes it's missing, then the Find My iPhone feature won't work. They won't be able to track it, right?
Yes, correct. And then that bad person could, do other things to the device. I mean, they already have access to the settings and everything like that. So
right.
Yeah. I guess the thing to point out, though, is before people get real excited, that, hey, my phone gets stolen, I can't track it. Family Map, which is an AT&T product, actually does still find the phone. You can still subscribe to services that will find the device. So even though this is not enabled, it just means that application that ties back to Apple iCloud isn't functional.
Right, and that's a good point, because this is not the only app that you can have on there. Lookout has a feature where you can track it, and we've got the AT&T one. So
the thing this is found in iOS up to 7.04. The reports are that the beta versions of iOS 7.1 do not have this problem, and whenever that 7.1 is released, then I would assume that this issue will be resolved there.
Yeah, and Apple's been good about when they hear about these things fixing them, so I anticipate that the fix will be out soon. So I guess first it was Angry Birds, now more recently it's Flappy Birds. What's going on with this, John?
Okay, well, I am a gamer. I'll be quick to admit to that to anybody who asks. I did not jump on the Flappy Birds bandwagon. It's an app that has you just tap a screen and fly among some pipes to get through it. It's from the times that I have played it or seen it on my kids' phones, it's near impossible to play. And so it was a very difficult game to encounter, but somehow it had that flavor of the month hit, and it was generating a ton of income to the author of this. He decided, even though all reports were he was making lots of money on this, he decided that per his own account that it was an addictive product, and he decided to pull Flappy Birds off of the market. And which means that anybody who has it still on their device, they can't, they're not going to be any updates. And then if they don't have it, then or if you delete it, you may not get it back. If you don't have it, you can't get it. So, it's kind of got this trend that everybody's kind of getting excited about. Oh, I've lost this game, and some people were really addicted to this. I'd heard reports of people throwing their phones and smashing them because they got stuck on a particular section of the game. Like I said, I thought it was impossible to begin with. So what's happening? When you see something like this, when something that becomes popular, it starts making money. People start making clones, and what we're seeing is that a lot of these clones that are coming out have some kind of a tie, sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes malicious. So I would be very careful. Third-party app stores, either even getting a legitimate one. Of course, he's pulled it, so it's no longer licensed for use. But even so, some of these non-standard or clones have the items, the issues where they have you turn on SMS messaging. One of the examples that's given in the article that I'm referencing most of the detail from, which is out of Naked Security on Sophos, they reference an article or an app that they found that actually prompted you, if you wanted to continue playing this because it was a trial, to enter your SMS, enter your phone number, and then they'd handle it. Well, all that stuff was not part of the original game. There was no fee to use it. It was a free game. And what they're finding out is people are getting charged for toll calls. getting parts of other malicious activity. People are scavenging data off of it because it's asking for more information. So it's becoming quite a sensation that not only the original Flappy Birds, but all these clones that are not so nice on your device.
Yeah, we've talked on the program before about these fake versions or wrapping legitimate versions with additional malicious capabilities. And so now that this one's been pulled by the original author, beware of any links you see to it out there. I saw one, not the article that you had linked to, but another one that did post the SHA-1 of the hash of the legitimate version for Android or was it for iOS? But yeah, now that it's been pulled, I'd be leery of pretty much any links for it out there. Okay, well, thank you, John. Now let's take a look at the internet weather. Got a little shorter report this week, but a couple of things that I did want to look at. First of all, scan flows here on TCP port 21320. There is no registered legitimate use for this port. I'm not aware of any unregistered but standard usage for this port. The only reference to this port that I could find when I was doing my research was a guy had posted about a year and a half ago that there was some malware that was setting up a proxy on this port. So 21320 is not one that we normally see a lot of traffic to, and you can see our baseline, maybe a million flows an hour. All of a sudden, though, in the last 4 or 5 days, it's jumped up to about 7 million. Not sure what it is that's looking for this. Most of the traffic comes from a single IP in the Netherlands, and then there are about an order of magnitude less traffic coming from 3 or 4 IPs in China. And looking at this, though, it looks like perhaps there are 2 different tools that are being used for this. The IP in the Netherlands and one of them in China, and there are only maybe 20 IPs that we really see scanning on this port. The one IP in the Netherlands and one of the ones in China was using a source port. It started at 32,768 and went up to 61,000. But the other one scanning out of China had a fixed source port of 6868. That's why I'm thinking there might be 2 particular tools that they're using out there. Again, I don't know exactly what it is they're looking for. Perhaps the malware that was referred to in that other post a year and a half ago really did set up a whole bunch of proxies, and that's what they're scanning for. Really don't know yet at this point. So keep your eyes open. If any of you out there have any idea what they're looking for, we'd love to hear from you. We'll continue to watch this one. The other one that was kind of anomalous this week was scanning on TCP port 1723. This is PPTP, it's point-to-point tunneling protocol. You see, we had some normal spiky behavior back here in the past. About the 29th of January, the peaks of these spikes went up. Then we had a period here where they kind of disappeared, and now they've come back. The spiky behavior is exactly the same as it was the last few days there of January. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. Almost all of this scanning, though, was coming primarily from one IP in China. It's like 2 orders of magnitude higher from this one IP in China than anybody else doing the scanning. I suspect that they're looking for vulnerable VPN endpoints, but not exactly sure there. Top 10 most probed ports this week is continuing kind of a trend that we've seen the last few weeks. 445 is not the top of the list. This week it's port 80 TCP, followed immediately by ports 22 and 23, SSH and Telnet. We've seen the last couple of weeks some increasing scanning and password guessing on 22 and 23. And port 80 normal web services, that has jumped up to the top of our list. 53 UDP DNS is still there. Folks most likely continuing to look for DNS servers that can be used for amplification attacks. 1433 Microsoft SQL Server, 3389 Remote Desktop, 443 HTTPS, and then 16471 UDP is one of the zero access UDP ports. When you look at the most sources doing the probing, here 445 goes back to the top of the list where it is most of the time. Then we get a lot of the ICMP backscatter here. That's 33 is port unreachable. So this is generally backscatter folks probing ports that are closed. Then we've got Telnet, various zero access ports, 80 TCP, 8080 TCP. Not really a whole lot unusual in this particular chart from what we normally see. That's our show for today. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ThreatTraq@list.att.com. You can also find us on Twitter. Our handle is @ThreatTraq. The ThreatTraq video is available at att.com/ThreatTraq and on YouTube. You can subscribe to an audio-only version of this program on iTunes. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Stan and John. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and until then, keep your network safe.